All right, folks, so at this point, it is obvious that the market is crashing. However, it makes me wonder, crashing the market fast or making it bleed slowly, like we were going through for years, it's probably more dangerous, and I'll get into it why. One of the major components is because life doesn't stop. I'll get into exactly what I mean by that. And two families randomly, with no knowledge of each other, called me, and they are kind of demanding or wanting the same results, right? Then I'll get into Welland properties, which is a pocket close between Niagara Falls and St. Catharines. And also, what is very important and most people are missing, it's March, right? Because it is tax time. So let's just go back trying to explain what I mean, the difference basically between crashing it fast and making it bleed slowly. Well, when you crash fast, it happens right there and then. You know exactly what you're dealing with. But this other segment of making the market bleed slowly can cause more harm because life gets in the way, right? People still have to continue to work, continue to live, continue to educate themselves. If they have kids, their cars break down. They have to buy new cars, there are new payments. Kids need tuition, students, school, more debt, more accumulation over a longer period of time, which gives a sense of hope, right? Because they say, look, next quarter, next spring. I think this is where things get extremely tricky because the hope gets in the way and the results are not on the table. And the first family called me. I want to get into that specifically. They obviously bought at the peak. They had a property before. They obviously sold that property and they have bought a bigger, better, and a more expensive property in the peak, right? So the question that I had is, why did you do that? And the answer was simple. We kind of felt that we will never be able to fetch a certain price bracket for our small property, and then buying the other property was just a logical way to do. They wanted more space, and even though they paid at the peak, so they paid top dollar. All right, so that was the explanation. However, today they cannot sell it for the price that they bought it. And when or if they sell it, they will basically walk out with zero money, right? Their down payment, I believe it was somewhere between 35 or 37% on that particular property. So the loss when they pay realtors, the fees, the debt accumulation that they accumulated along the way, because you have to understand, for a few years, they kept digging into their line of credits. They kept paying off bills with visas and stuff like that. So it's that vicious cycle that once they sell, or if they sell, they will basically be even with the bank and themselves, and they walk out with a zero on the street, no property, no address, basically, no money. Equity is gone, evaporated, but what will they gain? So I got into that conversation. What will you gain? And they said, well, nothing, like basically nothing. And I said, well, at least you're walking away and you have no stress. And they said, well, that's not good enough. So then I asked them, so what is your plan? Okay, like forget about what will happen, but what is your plan? And they said, well, at this point, we will stay where we are and just continue to borrow more against whatever we can, and hopefully the market turns around. And I said, the market turns around. What are you hoping for, right? Because in order for the market to turn around, you need 25 or maybe 30% in order for you to be even, right? And that's basically what they're hoping for, which I believe that eventually, when I say eventually, could be months, could be a year, could be two, I don't know. Like, I don't know their threshold, but they will lose that property and the bank will take it and they will be in more debt. So the second family has a different situation. One, they bought a long time ago, a lot of equity, a lot of everything, no issues whatsoever. Their debt ratio is very low. So basically, there's really no problems at this point. However, they want to leave. They want to leave Canada for good. And I asked them why. I mean, like, what's the reason? I mean, you are employed, you can live, you're not stressing with cash flow or month-to-month payment, but they just want to leave. And they said they feel that they will lose way more equity. And I believe they want to fly to Europe. I don't know which country exactly, maybe Eastern Europe. And they believe that they can live a better life if they eject basically right now. So the whole point is they started calculating how they could have gotten an X amount. I believe at the time at the peak was 1.5, and they could walk out with 1.2, and they already lost 300K in their head and all of that stuff. I'm like, look, you didn't sell, you didn't buy. I mean, it is what it is, right? So but they feel that if they stick around for longer, that 1.2 could be 900, the 900 could be 700, and they're in that limbo at this point that they would like to leave. So it is interesting that one family wants to leave because they cannot survive, and the other family wants to leave because they're stressing that the property values will collapse. So then let's get into taxes, right? So taxes is something that at one point I did not hear a lot of issues. Like you hear the odd, 20 years ago, the odd person, I didn't pay my taxes for this year. I pushed it towards the next year and we'll be fine and all of that stuff. Like I've seen that. I've seen people opening corporations, washing it obviously legally and all of that stuff. But recently, like I've seen the accumulation of debt in taxes, whether it's corporation, incorporation, personal, whatever, however you slice it, enormous, right? So that signals me that people were trying to find the best way or the most sense way in their head how to preserve their hard-earned money, and that money is already in the bank, and just kind of put the government on hold when it comes to taxes. However, that backfires. However you slice it, it backfires, and it backfires with interest rates and everything that's obviously added on top of that. So I don't know if it's smart or not. I know that many folks, even in real estate field, that like I kept mentioning this in my other videos. Uh, you know, especially realtors, commission based only, they were kind of pressured or pushed into that segment or visual aspect of luxury. Buy a car, you have to have some kind of a standard visual, and then at one point, like, you'll make that money, you're only two sales away and all of that nonsense, right? But the card that they sign on the dotted line today is for 5 years or 3-year lease or 7-year purchase, whatever the case is, and the payments don't go away, right? So your income has to always be a target, and it always has to be on top, right? Like it always, you have to hit that threshold, right? So now we see with all the market shifts and everything else that obviously realtors have been hit tremendously, and they have issues because they cannot fulfill that gap with all of those I would say bills that they accumulated along the way. So I don't know. So most of them grab to the tax segment because money is sitting in the account. So why pay them? Let's just stay afloat and then we'll figure it out, right? So I think you'll bite them, you know exactly what I'm trying to say where. And then to the Welland story, you know, property was purchased just before the peak. They got into the peak. They didn't sell because they're like, there's no point. We cannot buy. We love it here. You know, all of that nonsense. By the way, it's my colleague that dealt on this property, and I had conversations with him. Great guy. We were sharing the experiences and the mindset of what they believed. However, that particular person owning that house did a fantastic job. I'm talking marble floors, kitchen fully decked out, some walls were moved. The house looks stunning, and the house basically belongs on the street, but the interior does not belong there. It belongs in Hyde Park. It belongs somewhere where you could kind of recoup that money or that type of investment. So what I believe what happened, and I mentioned this to my friend colleague, I said like, look, I don't believe that person owning this house banked on the resale. I think what happened in between is that they bought the house, the prices started rising crazy during the peak, and then they kept borrowing against the house to accommodate the interior, to make it their dream house, because the party will never end in their head, right? Like if you see gains of $100,000 to $200,000 annually, like all of a sudden some people think they're rich. So, you know, making that dream house for themselves or for their partner or whatever it is, like made them feel good, right? So even those finishes were, you know, like very, very immaculate, like top of the line, like attention to detail, like made sense. And what happened is that once they saw those declines, and in Welland, those declines were more significant than some other areas, let's say of Toronto, which is still declines, but less declines, and more buyers that could actually fork out for those luxuries and those type of aspects, even though the landscape is changing, and I will get into it in my other video. However, at this point, they found themselves in this limbo because they saw the gains, they borrowed against, they upgraded a house that was way, way, way overqualified in upgrades to fetch that money back, and the prices declined. Those upgrades helped, but not even close to return on that particular investment. And what happened? So they lose on both ends. They lose on the value of equity, and then plus they lost on the actual borrowing against those properties. So they lost on both ends, and my colleague finally sold that house for a significant loss. They started close to $1.4 million. They barely got a million for it, or just under $1 million. So it just goes to show you that it's crazy, crazy out there. So just to be clear, I don't believe that price of 1.4 at the time of sale was realistic. Maybe that price of 1.4 was realistic price point in the peak, But once we went to the other side of the cliff, I think they were closer to 1.2 in the beginning of the sale, and then it kept dragging on and dragging on and dragging on. And my colleague did push, like we had conversations every few weeks to a month, just to kind of because even he was asking like, what is wrong? I'm like, dude, like 2 weeks went by, zero showings, you're overpriced, there's no interest, right? Even though the seller is pushing you and the house is stunning, like literally stunning, makes no difference, right? Because no one is willing to pay that price. So that's just a simple equation. So I hope you gained some value out of this video. So please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.